Okay, so let's wind up social development by talking a little bit about love and marriage. About 90% of Americans will marry at some point in their lifetime. Now that gay marriage is legal in pretty much every state, probably more, the percentage will go even higher because a subset of people were prohibited from marrying when this 90% statistic was generated. So let's just put it this way. Most Americans will get married at some point in their life. 28% of first marriages will fail within 20 years. Okay, you've probably heard that 50% of all marriages end in divorce, right? And then now I'm claiming that it's only 28%. Well, let's parse the statistics. My statistic says 28% of first marriages will fail within 20 years. This is Census Bureau data that follows couples over time who report being married, and then we follow them across, census reports, which are every 10 years, and we find that 28% of marriages that are reported in a given year will no longer be married by the 20-year census retake. Okay, that's a much smaller number than 50% of all marriages. Okay, so I said 28% of first marriages versus 50% of all marriages. When the statistic 50% of all marriages end in divorce was generated, the way that they calculate that is they take the number of marriages that occur within a year and the number of divorces that occur within a year and divide. So you take the number of marriages, divide by the number of divorces, and that provides that 50% number. That is not the same thing as what I reported here on this slide, which is following couples across their marital lifespan to figure out whether they stayed married or not. So if you follow individual couples, their probability of divorce within 20 years is 28%. If you just take how many people got married in a year and divided it by how many people got divorced in a year, you've got the 50%. I'd also like to point out, not only is it faulty, it's like a cross-sectional design to look at number of marriages versus number of divorces. They also are reporting 50% of all marriages. They're taking, it's not just first marriages, they're taking second, third, fourth, lumping it all together, and then looking at divorces that could be divorces from a first marriage, but they could also be divorces from a third or fourth marriage. With every subsequent marriage, you have a higher probability of divorce. So it's all very misleading to say 50% of marriages fail. Most first marriages succeed, even when you cohabit, so please don't take this wrong. But couples who cohabit, that is, live together as a couple, a romantic couple prior to marriage, you actually have a higher risk of your marriage failing if you cohabit first than if you didn't cohabit before you married. A lot of young people today, this has become like just a normal stage in dating, right? You first hang out in groups. Okay, we kind of like each other. Then you start doing stuff one-on-one. Then you decide that you're in love, and then you move in. And then if everything goes okay, then you get married. That's sort of the sequence of romantic events these days. But it turns out that couples who cohabit first off, there is a really high breakup rate among cohabitors. 70% of couples who move in, claiming that they're doing it, they're in love and they plan on always being together and they don't need a piece of paper and that kind of thing, 70% of those cohabitors never end up marrying. So they either stay together in a persistent cohabiting relationship or they break up. It doesn't necessarily always mean that they broke up. They may just always cohabit. Of the 30% who go on to marry, 38% of those will end up in failure if it's the first marriage for both partners. That's another important caveat, because if either one of you has been married before, cohabiting prior to marriage can be very beneficial in determining whether you're actually compatible. But if it's your first marriage, statistically you're better off not moving in together before you get married. Now, why? Does the act of cohabiting actually make your marriage less stable? We're not exactly sure. One study showed that cohabiting couples have poorer communication skills than married couples do. Is it the act of cohabiting that gives you poor communication skills, or is it that people with poor communication skills are more likely to cohabit? We're not sure. Some people have argued that the people who cohabit before they get married are less likely to see marriage as like a religious step. They're less likely to see it as like a sanctified step. And so as a result, they're less likely to stay married even if they're slightly dissatisfied to very dissatisfied with the marriage. So it could be that cohabiting couples in general have an attitude about marriage that makes divorce more likely. It's hard to know. We don't know exactly why. But we do know that cohabiting first does not protect a relationship in the sense of giving you a trial run and being more sure about your partner. Couples who cohabit oftentimes get swept along in the expectation that once you've cohabited, you've got to get married, and then they get swept up in that. They get married, even though they saw red flags and thought, maybe we shouldn't get married. They get swept up and they get married anyway. And so it's not a great protective mechanism against a potentially negative marriage. But I mean, a lot of times I have students who read this section in the textbook and hear this section in the lecture, and they feel defensive about it because they are cohabiting or because they value cohabitation and things like that. You can't take this stuff personally. You got to remember, if we flip these statistics, we've got 72% of non-cohabitors and 62% of cohabitors having successful marriages that last at least 20 years. So that's still the vast majority. Can't take this stuff too personally or anything. It's just information to keep in mind. Cohabitation might not work the way that people think that it should work. The last thing I want to talk about with regard to social development is like happiness across your lifespan or satisfaction across your lifespan. If you follow people across their lifespan and give them a satisfaction questionnaire at different times in their lives, do a longitudinal design, follow through, you find people who were satisfied when they were young tend to be satisfied when they're older. How happy you are, how satisfied you are with your life seems to be unrelated to your stage of development. You do see a little bit of a dip there in midlife. I will confess I'm at midlife. I already mentioned I have an 18 and a 21-year-old, and I got to tell you what, the teen years are very stressful. I gotta tell you what. And I'm somebody who is like trained and well prepared for it, and have like all these psychological coping strategies, and oh my gosh, it's stressful. As the kids start to move out, couples start to feel more satisfied. Individuals start to feel more satisfied. Midlife, you're really struggling to get to a certain place in your career, and then once you get to that point, satisfaction is going to return again. And then you'll notice at 65 people are retiring, and satisfaction's back to where it was when you were 15 to 24, a little higher in fact. So, but really, if we statistically analyze those bars, we'll find that they aren't significantly different from each other. People who are satisfied when they were younger are likely to be satisfied their whole lifespan. People who are dissatisfied when they were younger are likely to be dissatisfied their whole lifespan. So it seems to be more of an approach to the world rather than a reaction to objective situations. I think that's good news, because if you're a person who's generally happy right now, it's good news to know that you probably will be generally happy your whole life. That pretty much you'll be very resilient even in the face of stressors and stuff like that. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break here, and we will wrap up this chapter with a little discussion of the physical development that goes on during adolescence.